when you see what were meant to be their private exchanges over this, you see the disdain, the contempt, the dislike for Europe. Why was this stuff being debated on a commercial WhatsApp-style group where you have got no control?
In the group, Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defence, the people who are planning America's strategic interests in the world now are just bumbling along on a group, chatting to each other with emojis. You cannot get over it.
You ever try to start a group text? You're adding people and you accidentally add the wrong person. All of a sudden, your Aunt Mary knows all your raunchy plans for the bachelor party. Well, that kind of happened today with the Trump administration. Mike Waltz was putting together a group chat on Signal.
Yeah, also utterly trivial. It's just like going for a bachelor party, except that the 16 most senior people in national security in the US, added by mistake the editor-in-chief of a magazine critical of Donald Trump and who knows about national security. And they revealed their war plans 2 hours before they started bombing Houthi rebels in Yemen.
Today we're going to tell you the story of the Houthi PC small group Signal group chat and how Jeffrey Goldberg found himself centre stage of something he should never, ever have been a part of. Welcome to the Newsagents.
It's John.
It's Emily.
And I try to ration my use of bad language on this podcast because, well, it's just not a great look. But has there been a up like this one where the National Security Advisor adds, by mistake, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine to a chat group about something that is totally confidential, highly secret, could compromise agents in the field with the war plans of what the US is going to do in Yemen? I honestly find it difficult to think of anything that comes close in the scale of utter crass stupidity as what has just unfolded.
Yeah, this is the story that broke early yesterday evening UK time. And it broke when the journalist at the centre of this, Jeffrey Goldberg, who writes for The Atlantic, posted a piece in which he says, remember how the Houthis were bombed by the US earlier this month? Well, I actually knew about this 2 hours before. He was added to a group chat on Signal. Now, Signal is not WhatsApp, but it almost is. It is easily compromised. It is not secure. It is not a place that national security business should be done. It is not a place where wars should be planned, strikes should be planned. The messages can disappear, so there is no accountability, no transparency, no responsibility for anything that anyone says on here. And I think the fact that Signal was being used in the first place to describe the bombing of Yemen is the first thing that should trigger real concern. How a journalist then got added on by Mike Waltz, one of the group, is the thing that absolutely beggars belief.
Look, spend any time in Washington, speak to people who are part of the administration, and you understand the way business is transacted. I mean, yeah, we all know about the Situation Room on the lower ground floor in the West Wing of the Oval Office, where everyone gathers around big TV screens, and you've got the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you've got the president, all the rest of it. But then when you have meetings about what may have happened in the Situation Room, you go into the SCIF, the Secure Compartmentalised Information Facility. And that is where you've got a room where you don't take your phones in and it can't be penetrated by eavesdropping devices or other mobile signals. This is the secure area where you're only allowed to see those confidential documents. You have, if you are part of the administration, on your computer what's called a high-sided inbox, which is where the classified material will come. Why was this stuff being debated on a commercial WhatsApp-style group where you have got no control? the US administration, and also, I mean, the comedy elements of it. I mean, the emojis to describe, strong arm, fire,
America,
after
but
you've just bombed them.
we should explain this group, because in the group we understand Marco Rubio, in the group JD Vance, you've got the Secretary of State there and the Vice President, in the group Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defence. And the way Jeffrey Goldberg describes this group is he's so cautious. He doesn't actually say Marco Rubio types. He just says a person identified only as MAR, Marco Antonio Rubio. A person using the identification JD Vance. I mean, these people are clearly Marco Rubio and JD Vance. And yet the one person who is cautious with the information that he puts out is the actual investigative journalist who is trying to understand what on earth he's doing as all these messages are being typed by the most critical people in the entire Trump administration to world affairs. I mean, Pete Hegseth, who would ever have foreseen that taking a former weekend Fox and Friends anchor and making him into the actual Department for Defence Secretary could end up this way? I mean, what a surprise. But this whole concept that the people who are planning America's strategic interests in the world now are just bumbling along on a group, chatting to each other with emojis. You cannot get over it.
And Pete Hegseth was challenged about this when he was I think he was on his way to Guam or somewhere like that, which I think is where he is now, about the story that Jeffrey Goldberg had in the Atlantic, and this is his measured response.
Can you share how your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in the Atlantic, and were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence. We will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly.
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used?
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Okay, so no one was texting war plans. We'll come back to that in a moment. But you listen to the defence, and although it sounds utterly risible, as always in a Trump administration, Pete Hegseth's words are not for the American public. They are for one man sitting in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue talking about the Russia hoax, talking about this, all the things that Donald Trump would want to hear. Pete Hegseth, realistically, should be fighting for his political career right now. But the way he's framed it is, look, I'm standing up for Donald, absolute loyalty to the king. That might just save his skin when arguably it was sharing war plans.
I mean, not even arguably. It was sharing war plans, because we know exactly what appeared on the group chat happened in real life just hours later. And Jeffrey Goldberg was asked to comment on Pete Hegseth's words, and he said, guys, I've got the actual war plans on my phone. Why do you think I didn't share it? Because I didn't want US military to risk their lives. I didn't want to compromise our national security. In other words, the only person in that whole group chat who was thinking quite seriously about America's national security was the journalist who shouldn't have been there in the first place, right? He's the one who keeps on redacting people's names or taking out bits of detail or explaining why he hasn't put things in full or locations in full or timings in full because he doesn't want to get the armed forces into serious trouble. None of the others on that group seem to be at all aware that their information could be compromised. It's horrific.
Well, this is what Jeffrey Goldberg had to say when he was asked about it on TV, and the response of Pete Hegseth.
I want to start by getting your reaction to what we heard from Secretary Hegseth there, saying that nobody was texting war plans. Given you were privy to this group chat, is that how you saw it?
No, that's a lie. He was texting war plans. He was texting attack plans. When targets were going to be targeted, how they were going to be targeted, who was at the targets, when the next sequence of attacks were happening. I didn't publish this, and I continue not to publish it because it felt like it was too confidential, too technical, and I worry, honestly, that sharing that kind of information in public could endanger American military personnel.
I mean, it is funny. Never has a journalist had to work less hard for a scoop of a lifetime than Jeffrey Goldberg, who didn't intend to be at the centre of this story, who didn't go looking for it, who has handled the whole thing brilliantly. He just ended up on the chain. And what he saw on the chain, in terms of the content, is also really indicative as to how Trump's henchmen see Europe right now.
It's absolutely remarkable. We have seen that J.D. Vance came to Munich to the security conference and said, Europe, you've got to get your act together, you've got to change. And I thought it was performative and I thought it was kind of slightly unpleasant, but you kind of see that there was a political message. When you see what were meant to be their private exchanges over this, you see the disdain, the contempt, the dislike for Europe, which if you are in Paris or Berlin or London or Rome this morning, you'll be thinking, Christ, they really do hate us. At one point, J.D. Vance questions why this is happening. And
yeah, he says, if you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again.
And to which Hegseth replies, fully embracing it, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic in block capitals. But let us say this quietly, the only time that Article 5 of the NATO treaty, where an attack on one is an attack on all, was after America was attacked at 9/11 and Europe rallied to America's side. So, I mean, spare us overdoing the freeloading bit. Yeah, does Europe need to spend more? Absolutely. But I would imagine that if you're in MI6 or you're in GCHQ and you are intelligence sharing with Americans, you're thinking, what a bunch of bloody clowns. They can't look after. Look at that. They're playing fast and loose with vital national security information and they're sharing it with a frigging journalist. Unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, there are questions now, and you raised them, about if anyone is going to lose their job. Mike Waltz was the person who originally added on Jeffrey Goldberg. We don't understand how he got the name, why he thought it was a good idea. You know, there are even some people in MAGA world trying to argue that the whole thing was set up. It was a deliberate leak. I've really racked my brains on this one. I've really tried to get into the mindset whereby you would sort of deliberately, accidentally add a journalist to your group chat. It doesn't work for me. So let's assume that Mike Waltz did make a mistake. Jesse Waters, who you heard at the very beginning on Fox News, seems to suggest that, yeah, it was a up. It was just like what we all do when we add our aunt. I mean, I don't add my aunt. But anyway, I don't think that there was a deliberate plan here. And I think Mike Waltz is the person who is most in the firing line. But as you said, why would Trump fire somebody for an error? That's not what gets you fired in Trumpland. The thing that gets you fired in Trumpland is disloyalty. Right? Or if you do a nasty picture of him or a portrait or something. But he doesn't really mind people up. And if their heads are called for by Democrats or liberals or, you know, the other side, then it probably cements them even more firmly in his favour. So what do you think? Do you think Mike Waltz loses his job?
Not yet, because that would be giving in to the mob. Also, there's a kind of really good structural reason, which is that a national security advisor does not need Senate approval, whereby a defence secretary does. So Trump can appoint whoever he wants to be the next national security advisor. They're easily dispensable and easily employed again.
But Trump first has to recognise that there has been a at the heart of his administration. Yesterday, he couldn't do that.
Your reaction to the story in The Atlantic that said that some of your top cabinet officials and aides had been discussing very sensitive material through Signal and included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it.
So that was classic Donald Trump. When you get a bad story, don't know anything about it. When you got someone who's kind of embarrassed you, I don't know anything, I don't know him. I don't know what QAnon is. I don't know what the Proud Boys are. Who are they? They seem to like me, so that's okay. Yeah. And Donald Trump playing ignorance is what he does. Today, interestingly, he has come out and sort of given Mike Waltz a bit of an embrace.
Yeah, interesting. So learned a lesson. What? It's very embarrassing, but you're fine. Nothing went wrong.
For now.
For now. For now. It's good to know that in the patriarchy, you can make that big an error and your job is still safe.
I'm sure they'd have been just as understanding about Hillary Clinton's emails and wouldn't have made any fuss about that. If you want a bit of irony, you know that Judge Boasberg, who we've been talking about, who wanted to know why all those Venezuelans were put on a plane to El Salvador, to that Supermax prison, or they're saying they can't give him the information he wants for national security reasons.
Yeah, very important. And I think we should just spare a thought for poor Elon Musk, who wasn't in the group chat. Thoughts and prayers, Elon.
But can I just tell a little story of when I was in the US? Because I also got inside information about a planned military attack when I was based in Washington. And 2 hours, it was late Friday afternoon, someone rings me and says, we're going to be attacking Syrian targets after the use of chemical weapons by Bashar al-Assad. And Trump is going to make a statement to the American people at 9 o'clock this evening. So White House, I put it up on Twitter, White House journalists then ring the White House and say, hey, what's this that John Sopel's reporting? They say it's total nonsense. Go and enjoy your Friday evening. He's got this completely wrong. And then, of course, it absolutely happens and Trump addresses the American people at 9 p.m. Big relief. I haven't totally screwed up the story.
But did you think twice about whether you'd post something?
Yes, I did. I thought about it, but it was such a good source. I thought I'm going to go with it. 3 days later, I see that on the front of my mobile phone, I have got a message from the person who sent me the thing. And I press on it to open it up, and it won't open up. I cannot open up the message that stays on the front of my phone. So a couple of days later, I ring the source and say, were you trying to get hold of me? I've got a message that I can't open. He goes, oh, that's weird. I've got a message from you that I can't open. At which point the advice was, strip your phone or replace your phone. It has been compromised. Now, that was the first administration, which was meant to be the shambles and chaos and make it up as you go along. This is meant to be the new professional, streamlined organisation, laser focus on delivery. And I have never seen a screw up like it. And just before we go, a reminder that we'll be hearing from Rachel Reeves with her spring statement. I don't think it's a budget. I don't think we're calling it a budget. And I think last autumn she was saying she wasn't going to do a statement like this.
It's a set-piece fiscal event.
Ah.
Yeah. It's a kind of shout and duck, I think. There are a lot of Labour MPs very, very concerned with what she's going to come out with tomorrow. She is meant to be announcing massive cuts to public services. She is potentially going to offer some kind of sweetener on housing, but there are many people who are starting to use the word austerity around Rachel Reeves's chancellorship and wondering whether we are just re-entering a 2012 playbook where you cut the funding of the most vulnerable in the country.
And you have equally got Conservatives who are saying, where's the growth you promised? Where was this government all about growth? We haven't seen any of it yet. So a really difficult day for Rachel Reeves tomorrow, and we will be covering it all. See you then. Bye-bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.